Another week, another Vegas Apex card, UFC Vegas 89, 6-fight main card. Alex,
I'm in my groove and I'm not ready for a day off. I'm liking the Apex more and more. I know people don't like it. I'm in.
I mean, as we say every week, I like it, the fact that we have cards every week, but man, we need some crowds.
I agree. But unfortunately, it's not like I would be going to the UFC fight anyway now.
Yeah, but the crowd gives you something even on through the TV.
It does. It does.
But let's start off with the main card opener. Fernando Padilla, the Mexican, taking on another Mexican, Luis Pajuelo. Pajuelo making his UFC debut. He's 8-1 fighter, 7 knockouts, 7 out of his 8 wins. Taking on Padilla, who's 1-1 in the UFC, 15-5 overall. Padilla coming off of a decision loss in his last fight in September as well.
Yep. Padilla's 1-1 in the UFC. He's got a 1 KO win, 1 decision loss, like you said. His last fight was against Kyle Nelson, which was that decision loss.
So Padilla, as we said, Pajuelo, 7 out of his 8 wins are KOs. Padilla never been finished. So it's going to be interesting to see how that lines up. Because as we know, when you make the jump to the UFC, the finishes, especially knockouts, don't always translate.
They don't. So those 7 KOs, he could be just that guy that, his 9th fight, he shows up in the UFC and he's just doing what he did.
Or he could be like most of the other guys where it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment.
Right.
And we're going to see if that power can translate.
Padilla, on the other hand, he has a pretty decent reach advantage, but he's just one of those guys with those long arms. He's not in the UFC. He does have the KO win and the decision loss, but we don't have a big sample size to see if that reach is translating. I think Luis Pajuelo is actually going to have what it takes to get the upset here. I think he is the real deal, and while I don't think he's going to translate immediately into knockouts and immediate finish victories, I think he's going to be busy enough to at least win the fight, on the scorecards.
I actually agree with you. I think he comes in, makes his UFC debut with a nice win. I think he might be able to finish Padilla for the first time too.
And I mean, I would like to see a finish 100%. I just think with that reach advantage, Padilla is going to be able to keep him at range, and it's going to be more Padilla being on the defensive for most of the fight, with Pajuelo moving forward, trying to get in the guard of Padilla's long reach. But anyway, I digress. Let's move on to the next fight. Billy Quarantino taking on the Moroccan Devil, Youssef Zala.
Making his way back to the UFC after
second debut.
Second debut. He had 7 fights, went 3 wins, 3 losses, and no contest.
Yeah, I normally look at the whole thing, and this one I almost just looked at the top 2 fights or 3 fights.
He lost his last 3.
I look like a dumbass.
He lost his last 3 UFC fights. He lost 3 out of his last 4, the other one being the no contest. Got cut. Went 3-0 after that. And now he's back in the UFC. So we'll see if he learned anything, if he got better, if he's the same fighter. And he's taking on a guy in Billy Q who's been in the UFC for a while. This will be his 10th UFC fight.
To his credit, though, Zala, when he was in the UFC for the first time, he went 3-3-1. One of them was a no contest, like you said, right at the end. But his first loss in the UFC was Ilia Topuria. So
what about the other 2 after that?
Give the guy a little bit of credit. They cut him.
He's never been finished.
Yeah, they cut him on decision losses. I mean, I get they want more.
If you're not exciting and you're not winning fights.
But he's back, so obviously he's doing something right. So I actually think Youssef's going to put on a decent performance. I think Billy Q's going to win. He drew to Damone Blackshear, who's also he came into the UFC as this big knockout power, and he's done a couple knockouts, done some. He's just like most people who come into the UFC. The
a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Right, exactly. The huge highlight stuff stays, but it's not every single fight because there's levels. It's different. I think he's going to put on a good performance. But I think Billy Q has what it takes to ultimately get the win
here. Yeah, I think Billy Q, both guys pretty well-rounded. I think Billy Q, he's been in the UFC longer. He knows how to stay in there. I think he gets the win. Youssef, tough way to start. This will be 5 UFC. If he loses this, it'll be 5 straight UFC fights without a win.
Yeah, that's hard.
But like you said, I think he comes in. I think he shows he's improved, but I think the experience of Billy Q is going to be the factor, the determining factor in this one.
My other little tidbit is Billy Q wins 71% of the time when he's the favorite. You know, and he's one of the guys that's been in the UFC for a little while.
That's about his. 6-3.
Right.
It's not far off.
It gives him, it gives me the edge to think that he's going to be able to find a way to pull this one off, at least on the judges' scorecards, if not, being able to pull off a finish somewhere earlier.
All right, let's move on to the next fight. It's an undefeated Payton Talbott, 1-0 in the UFC, taking on a guy who just lost his first fight of his career, and Cameron Saaiman, who's 9-1, 3-1 in the UFC. Saaiman, an exciting guy. He gets finishes. He doesn't look like it because he looks like a little skinny, scrawny dweeb guy, but he knocks people out, and he is very tough.
Yeah, I would never call that guy a dweeb to his face.
He's very fun to watch fight.
He'd kill me.
Talbott, but as we said, he has the power too.
Yeah.
5 out of his 7 wins are knockouts.
He got his first sub his last fight out against
Picture
Nick
this.
Aguirre,
he gets to the UFC with no submission victories. His first UFC fight, known as a KO guy, first UFC fight, gets a rear naked choke victory.
But you remember how he had to do it? It's because he just could. They would not stop. They would not stop the fight. He was just teeing off on Nick Aguirre, and he wouldn't go out. So
yeah,
he was just like,
all
right, I got to take his back and choke him out now. That's a fight. That was a very good fight to rewatch. But it also shows, like, Payton Talbott has gas. He's got gas in the tank. He's got crazy power. They realistically should have stopped that fight just from, like, damage.
And one thing that's crazy about this, both guys, Talbott only 25, Saaiman only 23. I honestly think the talent both of these guys have, they are both, regardless of what happens in this fight, they are both, like, future legitimate top 10 guys in the division.
Absolutely. They're both going to be around for a while. And the good thing is they're both tall guys with long reach. So once they're done in this division, once they're done at bantamweight, they can move up to featherweight.
They can move up
to lightweight
with guys
and still compete at a bigger weight class and translate that power over if they decide. If not, they can just continue to cut weight and be these tall, big guys that are hard to beat in the bantamweight division.
So we're talking great about both these guys. What do you think happens in the fight?
I think Payton Talbott's power is going to continue to translate. He's shown that his power is translating in the UFC. He also showed that he knows a couple submissions when he has to, even though he doesn't, that's never what he's been going for. I think Cameron Saaiman, even though he's coming off a loss to Christian Rodriguez, or his first loss, I should say, man, it's tough. I think Payton Talbott has what it takes. I think Payton Talbott's going to win. I think this is going to be the toughest fight of his career for sure, because, like, I agree, Cameron Saaiman's definitely going to be a top 10. I just think Payton Talbott probably has the current edge in his career with at least his momentum trajectory. I think he's kind of in a better place.
I think this is probably going to end up being the most entertaining fight of this main card.
It very well could be.
I think Simon's going to bounce back from his first career loss. He's a guy he trains in the same camp and with Dracus Duplessis in South Africa.
I'm saying like I know the guy personally. No, I know exactly who you're talking about. I just never met him, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think that would have came up before now.
Maybe.
But I think Saaiman bounces back. I think Saaiman gets the win. I think he got his first career loss. I think he does Talbott the favor of giving him his first career loss this time out.
Okay, we'll see. I think Payton Talbott wins, so we disagree there. But let's not dwell on it anymore. Let's go to Edmen, the Golden Boy, Shahbazyan.
I don't know how Shahbazyan's only 26 years old. He's been in the UFC for a while.
Yeah, it seems like he's been in the UFC for as long as I've been alive.
His 10th UFC fight already, and 5-4 right now.
Taking on AJ Dobson, 7-2. Shahbazyan, he likes to go into wars. The problem is he doesn't always come out on top. He gets caught a couple times.
He was a guy, he relied all on his talent coming up.
Right.
And he kind of made a name for himself. A lot of people were talking. And then you start getting to the top part of the
once
division,
you rise
the better
the
guys.
ranks pretty quick, you face all
then
these
you start
guys
getting knocked out.
Right, you face all these guys that know what's going on, And all of a
like
sudden,
a Derek Brunson, or
exactly.
That's why he's lost 4 out of his last 5, including his last fight last May to Fluffy Hernandez, who we just saw a few weeks ago put on a stellar performance and a win. Go ahead. AJ Dobson 1-2 in the UFC. All of his fights have been decision. He's never been finished either.
I think that's probably, that stands to testament his chin, but it also stands to testament that he hasn't fought a whole bunch. I mean, he's got 9 career fights.
10 career fights. He has 7 wins, 2 losses.
Oh, and the no contest. Yeah, I have it written down and just didn't put it in the record like an idiot. But yeah, like I get that that's impressive, but he hasn't fought, the guys that Shahbazyan has fought. He hasn't gone to the top.
Can he get his confidence back?
I think he does.
And rise to his talent?
But I think the reason he does is because he's better at facing orthodox fighters than he is southpaw fighters. He's 5-3 against orthodox fighters. I think he has the advantage here because he's got a little bit more UFC experience. He's been in it twice. He's coming back into the UFC off of a like not losing streak. I think that's going to help him, get him a little momentum, get him a little like hype, make him feel good about himself. I think that's one of the things that's going to like push him forward.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I think Shahbazyan wins this fight. I think he stops the slide, and I think it just comes down to he's more talented than AJ Dobson. I think the talent ends up winning in this fight. I got Shahbazyan with the win.
Talent over camp. Every time.
So let's move on. Co-main event. This one, I said the Saaiman, Talbott fight was the most exciting. I may be corrected already.
Yeah, I forgot about that fight when you were talking. I would have immediately said something.
Justin the Badman Tafa, 7-3, 1 no contest, 4-3-1 in the UFC, but 3 out of his last 4 fights have been wins, all KOs.
Yep.
And he's taking on Karl Williams, 9-1 in the UFC. 9-1 overall, 2-0 in the UFC. Very rare that he's a big fighter, a heavyweight.
Yeah.
That most of his fights go to decision.
Yeah, it's weird. Most of these guys, they're like headhunters. That's pretty much it. You look at the top,
heavyweight. Yeah, it's like
you look at the top 10. Most of these guys have like 1 to 3 subs, maybe. A lot of them have none. You look at Stipe.
both of these guys have none.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You got headhunters in the heavyweight division. The decision aspect is weird. That makes me feel kind of a Tafa angle.
Karl Williams won 6 in a row, though.
Tafa started off in the UFC kind of poor. He was 1-4. He's rebounded well. He's 3-0-1 since. He get
all
the
KO wins too.
Eye poke to Austin Lane.
Then knocked him
the fuck out right after, which was great. When he got hurt a few weeks back, he offered up his brother for tribute. That didn't pay out well.
Sacrificed.
Yeah, exactly. I think Tafa strikes more, and he's a southpaw, which has been Karl Williams' least advantageous fighting style to face.
One thing I wrote about Tafa, I just put it in all caps, bold.
I like the when you think like that, it's like I gotta remember this one.
Heavy hands.
Yeah,
that's all I put. He's a guy. If he touches you, it might be night.
And it's crazy because truthfully, power doesn't translate on a camera. We see the guys get knocked out, but you can't see exactly how hard that hit is.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing that can show you. Unless he's bleeding or he's on the ground screaming.
It's Anthony Joshua against Francis Ngannou, then you could see how hard that hit was.
Yeah, that would be about it. But yeah, I think Justin Tafa is going to win. The heavy hands, that's a big thing. But also how well he's rebounded. His first 4 fights to his last 4 fights. 1-4, first 5 to the last 4. 1-4 to 3-0 essentially. I think that's he's kind of where he needs to be in the UFC, and I think he's comfortable. I think he's on his rise.
I think the bad man has found his groove, and I agree with you. I think he knocks Karl Williams out first round.
And to correct you again, this girl right here, Amanda Ribas, and this girl right here, Thug Rose, could very well be a more interesting fight than Payton Talbott, Cameron Saaiman.
I beg to differ.
They could be. I'm just saying, she gets into wars. She's been in wars.
She's also been. Have you watched Rose's last 2 fights?
Yes, they were damn near atrocities.
It just depends what Rose shows up today. This is the main event, by the way.
If True Thug Rose shows up, this could be a better this is why the main event
all about
is
her.
this.
It's all about her headspace.
Yep.
Thug Rose, surprisingly, 11-6 in the UFC. Not 11-6 overall, 9-5 in the UFC,
and two-time champ. 11-6, and you're two-time UFC champ. That's crazy.
Very crazy. Very strange last two fights with two losses. One, the Carla Esparza, which was maybe the most boring title fight of all time.
Yeah, I think she threw like 70 strikes.
Except for Adesanya versus Yoel Romero.
Yeah. I forgot about that fight.
Yeah, it was
because I wanted to block it out of my memory.
And then last time out, lost to Menal Fiorot.
You say it right.
I'm not helping
you. I'm not helping you. Say it again.
Who's in the main event next week?
I know exactly who to tag in this one.
Who's in the main event next week? How's Rose gonna
say it?
How's Rose gonna rebound after two straight fights? How's her headspace right now? She's already a person that, she's in her head a lot. I think she would even say that.
Yeah, she would definitely say that.
How's she gonna respond? And she's taking on Amanda Ribas, who, as you said, she gets in wars. She's a girl that does not quit. She's 7-3 in the UFC, 12-4 overall,
and she's so happy.
So happy. She's a very likable girl. Her last fight was also a loss. She's coming in off of. I'm sorry. Her last fight was a win.
Yeah.
Third round TKO. One interesting thing: Amanda Ribas, her last 7 fights, alternating win-loss, which means
she's kind of due.
She might be due for a loss.
Okay, I can see that.
Is she going to have 3 losses in a row? I can't see that. I don't know. This is a fight. I'm leaning Thug Rose, but honestly, if this turned out to be the most exciting fight or the most boring fight, I'm not going to be surprised.
I agree. I think, like you said, Rose's last 2 fights, she's lost. The last one was the first one that she lost was the belt to Carla Esparza. That was an abysmal performance by her. But, headspace is a big thing. She clearly wasn't ready to defend the title, mentally. And then the very next fight she fought after a break was in the flyweight division. That was, stepping up from strawweight to flyweight. Fighting Fiorot. She's currently the number 3. I think at that point she was like the number 10.
If Fiorot wins next week, she's
right in line to fight Alexa Grasso.
Yeah, she gets a title shot.
It's right there. I think being in the new division for Rose is going to help her a lot. Where Ribas has been here for a while, she's kind of comfortable with her power. She's comfortable with the weight. I think Rose's first fight in the division against Fiorot, I think it showed that she's kind of needs to work at it in this division, definitely, but I think she can get there, and I think this is a fight where she shows the distance between the two that she's been working this entire time. I think Rose gets the win. I think Vegas knows because the odds are minus 220, and I'm not trying to count against Vegas this time. This is going to be a good fight, and I think when somebody comes to fight like Ribas, I think Thug Rose is going to wake up, and we're going to see the champ that we've been begging to see.
I hope you're right.